Well, hello. Welcome to Dead Air Live. I'm Jean Flanagan. And today, my guest is Mike Hall, who's also an SPG member. We're going to see his work today on video feedback, and which is this art form that, do we say you invented it?
No, certainly not. Feedback has been around since the 60s. Originally an art form with video monitors instead of projectors, because back then projection technology was very limited and projectors were very expensive. So artists would point a camera at a video monitor and create a feedback loop that way.
Or a TV. So
Or,
that if
yes,
you,
a TV set.
If you point a camera at a TV set, you'll get this feedback.
Yes.
And then with projected, how does projected differ from just that?
Well, if you think of a TV set as being like a projector, except that the projection is behind the glass of the tube, then that's a rear projection feedback.
Okay.
But what I do is with the projector on the outside, pointing on the same side as the camera. So the camera and the projector are set together, and we project onto a screen. And so I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 years. I picked it up basically accidentally connecting video equipment together and started experimenting and discovered it, and I never looked back. I've had a great time playing with this.
Oh, good. Good. So Mike actually did an open studio. You have a studio in 4 Point Channel in
That's right.
Boston. And so he sent out his dutiful little postcards for the open studio. So I went, and what I saw was really amazing. So I decided that we needed to invite Mike onto his very own show and show some video feedback. You saw a little tiny piece in the intro, but that's really the most basic form of video feedback, right?
In a way, yes. There's quite a variety that I've hardly even started to touch, and I've discovered that it all depends on the equipment I use. If I put together a camera and a projector that I've never worked with before, chances are I'll get different images altogether, unlike anything I've ever done before. That's right.
So the specific equipment. We're
Makes a big
gonna
difference.
go over to the other side of the studio
Yep.
now, and we're gonna look at the equipment itself, what a projector is, what a video camera is, and then the screen, and then we're gonna come back here. We're gonna spend the time looking at all this fascinating movement that Mike's creating with this video feedback. So let's go on over to the set.
So you can see what I have here is two basic pieces of equipment. This is the video projector and the video camera. This is standard electronics equipment. You can get it at any store. I've connected the camera by a component interface, red, blue, and green wires, which are probably familiar to a lot of people who buy standard TVs these days. Well, high-definition TVs have these components.
Oh, that's why those colors and standard def, they look different, right?
Yeah, well, you could have different
Yellow.
video inputs. There's S-video, there's composite video, which is the single yellow jack that's going into your TV set. Or, in this case, we split the channels, the red, green, and blue channels, into 3 separate wires. And so that's
Each for a color.
each for a separate color.
Okay.
And in fact, part of the fun I have is switching the cables around so the red goes into the blue input and vice versa, and to see what happens. So that's the kind of experimentation I can do.
Okay.
But so I'll show you later how actually I create the images. But some of the component, I play with the menus on the projector to get a white balance, so particular colors are shown. I play with the zoom on the projector and on the camera, and when it all comes together, if I like what I see, then I save it, and that's what I do.
Then you save it because you're recording it
Yes,
ultimately onto your camera.
I could put a tape in the camera, or I could just port it directly into a computer. Sometimes I do that.
Okay.
But the important point that a lot of people don't realize is that there's no tape that's projecting onto the screen. I mean, I'm creating the images live. It's not like I'm playing back something through the camera, and a lot of people assume that that's the way it's working.
You're starting from
Absolutely.
nothing.
There could be an empty tape in the camera. There's nothing to start with.
Okay.
And then I create something from
Okay,
basically nothing.
Because of all the lines and
Right, right.
Now, so the feedback system is based on the concept that that any video is a series of images.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Video, standard digital video goes at 30 frames per second. And so whether you realize that you don't see those frames coming up because they're going so fast, we get a new image every 30 milliseconds, 30 times a second. And the difference between those images is what causes, the interesting effects.
Okay.
Because if one image is slightly different than the other, then that difference is what's picked up and it's exaggerated.
So your camera sees the image
Yes.
once every 30 seconds and projects an image once every 30
That's right,
seconds.
yes.
And then so it's seeing something different each time.
Absolutely.
And that creates all the
Yeah,
movement.
and
'cause
it
it's
seems to be
amazing how much-
animation. It seems like they're
Yeah.
real forms that are moving around, but actually it's just one image that's slightly different from the other, shown at a very fast speed,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
That's as much sense as we're going to get by standing here.
Yeah, by talking about it, yes.
So we're going to go back. We're going to start looking at some of the things of video.
There we go.
So this first segment of video, Mike, you call it flat wall
Yes.
video?
Yes, this is the most common form of video feedback is where you project onto a flat surface. And it's actually more challenging because if you project onto a wall that has a crack on it or a nail, then you can pick up on that nail to produce some images off of that. But with a perfectly flat wall without any of that, it becomes a challenge to get the first thing. So why don't we show what I've done, and maybe I can talk
Okay,
about how I achieve those
Let's see
effects.
some video.
I'm pretty sure they're about to show the video.
I know, they got to get the freeze frame off the. So this is this flat wall? This
Yes.
still image that we have is part of the flat wall
That's
work,
right, yeah, this is a still from the video that we're about to see.
Right.
Okay, so this is a study that I did way in the beginning. This is before I discovered the possibility of creating lines. This is a flashlight that I'm shining onto the screen, and because the camera's at a particular angle, it's producing an image of the flashlight into a spiral.
And you can watch the finger image disappear into the spiral now that
Absolutely.
had
So-
started around.
Right, so you see the hand going in there, and then the image of the fingers are wrapping around the spiral as each generation produces a new image that's just slightly off, just slightly different.
Wow. That's pretty basic. It's pretty amazing how much
Well-
happens from that.
And of course, it's a digital phenomenon. I mean, this happens on digital equipment. But I also play with analog effects in the sense that this whole projection is on a board, and you can see that it's moving back and forth. It's a board that's hanging from the ceiling. So what I've done is I've moved the board back and forth to make the image move. And so I'm using a physical movement in that way
okay.
to affect
Your
the digital.
flat wall
the
is
flat wall is
moving.
moving, right.
Okay.
So you can move the projector or the camera.
And that creates this
the
non-symmetrical.
non-symmetrical kind of effect.
Now,
and here I'm
is
moving
this
the flashlight too.
you're aiming this flashlight at
Yes.
the camera?
No, I'm aiming it at the screen.
Oh, so you're still sitting back there with
Yeah,
your
I'm back
projector
with
and your
where
video
the camera and the projector are.
Okay.
Yeah. If you shoot a light into the camera, you just get a bright spot,
You just
like
get a bright
star,
spot.
and you don't see
Okay,
anything.
so this is reflecting off the screen itself.
Now this is when I discovered this line phenomenon, and I can't exactly explain where it comes from. But under certain controlled conditions, I can create either black lines on white or white lines on black.
Wow.
And again, it's affected by shadows. There's my hand into the mix where I'm trying to create new lines. This was during a show at Waltham Open Studios. A friend of mine invited me to bring another art piece that I was working on at the time, Melodicon, and then I discovered these lines, and the person hosting the show said, don't do Melodicon, do this. This is much more interesting. And I had to admit, this was like the beginning of a whole new realm for me.
Right.
Because with these lines, you're able to do anything. And I can demonstrate, the kinds of things that I've done. Sometimes I use two projectors to make the lines cross, or I
Okay.
turn the projector or turn the camera in a way that creates a geometric pattern with the lines.
But you didn't have any lines on the first spiral.
No, I didn't
But
realize I
you
could
don't
do
know.
that.
You don't
This
know
was back in 2003.
which causes the lines.
I've been able to generate lines with any combination of equipment. So
Okay.
given any camera and any projector, I used to think it was a bug in the projector. But then I discovered
Look
that,
at you erasing the lines.
yes,
How
this is
cool
with a
that?
flashlight, so it erases the lines because it adds light. See, this whole thing is shadows and light. So, you put your hand in front of it to create a shadow. Of course, my
Yes.
hand isn't shadowing it here. This is a DVD. Or you can use a flashlight in order to basically erase the image that you've got. This is a performance I did a couple years ago at a rave. The sound is off, so you can't exactly hear what's going on in the background, but it was a pretty wild party.
That may be just as well.
Just as well. And at a location called the Art Interactive in Cambridge. And the room is very interesting
Wow.
because it has a metal tile floor. And as the DJ was cranking up the volume, you could feel the floor vibrate
Yeah.
because it's on stilts. And so I noticed that as the sound was, boom, 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 the camera was jiggling. And that caused the images to shake as well, just like I was shaking the board in the previous image.
Right.
So I thought that was neat because it was like being interactive with the room and kind of being in sync with, and people didn't realize it because, of course, the zooming of the images kind of made sense with
Made
the sound
sense,
that you were
right.
hearing.
Okay. How do you get the color? Where's the color coming from?
Well, the color is, it's the same principle where each frame is slightly different from the other. So if you change the white balance or the background color of the projector, what that does is makes each frame slightly different colors. So you start with yellow, one frame is yellow, the
One
next
frame's
frame
yellow.
is slightly orangey yellow, and a little bit more orange, and a little bit more orange, because each frame is slightly different, little on the orange side.
So it'll go
And
all
this
the way through
cycles
the rainbow.
all through the rainbow.
Wow.
And it happens so fast, of course, it almost, it's like seizure inducing. It can be like very violent, very, very aggressive switching of colors. And
So how much have you slowed this down?
this is full speed.
This is full speed.
I've
okay.
done other videos in which I've slowed things down so you could see actually the detail of what's happening. But I also like to keep it full speed to give the sense of the activity.
Yeah.
This is an interesting study for me because it involves, these are streamers, or it's one streamer actually. It's just nailed onto the wall. And I've got the video feedback, which will come back again, which is reacting to the streamer, which is being blown on by a fan. So basically I set up this whole environment.
Right.
I turned on the fan, put up the streamer on the wall, and then stepped back and let the images create themselves.
Cool.
So in a sense, I'm not like doing anything. I'm not like manipulating equipment or actually creating art like an artist with a brush. All I'm doing is setting up the circumstances that would possibly, hopefully, create an interesting set
Something
of
interesting.
images. And so this is kind of like autonomic art or auto-created art in that sense. And I'm not the first to do this. I mean, a lot of people set up situations in which interesting things happen. But I don't think anyone's ever had these consequences happen.
Now, is that still your ribbon?
Yep, yeah.
Okay.
And this is at a point where I was being able to control the lines more, so you could have that single line in the center, and I could manipulate it. I found a way to actually hold on to and control individual lines, like that one's just splitting apart.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Now, as we go through and watch this sequence from the spiral through the lines, through the ribbon, is this reasonably sequential in terms of your explorations?
Yes, I put these in basically in order
Okay.
of the things and the way I discovered them. There's a great deal of content that's missing from this. Now, this I have to describe very quickly. This is 2 projections. I believe, I can't exactly remember how I did this, but what is amazing to me is that this blue or purple thing seems to be consumed by the red one as if they're separate entities, and seems to be spit out by the red one. And I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but it's almost as if we're looking under a microscope at a microbe, or some cellular process.
Right.
And a lot of times I'm seeing a simulation of something that's very lifelike, something that looks like it could be living. For example, this, you see these lines that kind of squiggle around. Well, they resemble worms. I mean, you can imagine looking in a petri dish and seeing like all of this activity.
Right.
And so, I mean, I'm not trying to generate something that looks like life, but it's interesting to me that so many times it comes up that these forms, like branches or roots or other features that look like bugs or anything like that, will come up just naturally in video feedback.
Right. Now this is still normal speed.
Oh, it's absolutely normal.
I mean,
it's totally normal. What I like, this is interesting to me because you have these circles that are expanding out, and then I'm not sure if it's exactly shown in this segment of the video, but the spiral appears to be going inward while the circle is expanding out. So we have movement in so many different directions,
Yeah.
and much faster than the brain can process. I mean, it's impossible to understand or contemplate how each of these
there's the
little
spiral.
segments, yeah, so it seems to be like spiraling in. But the energy is remarkably balanced. I mean, it doesn't feel like it's coming in. It just seems like it's all
Right.
together.
Right.
This is made possible. This is a very static image. So what I was trying to achieve was without the movement, trying to
Right.
eliminate the movement. And actually, that's not very easy. But what I found is that if I tilt the camera at an even multiple of the circle, for example, dividing it by 3, and divide the circle into 60-degree parts, or something like 120-degree parts. And so what it creates is these images that are aligned on a triangle. And so every generation reinforces that triangle.
Looks more at itself.
Looks more like a triangle.
Right.
And for that reason, it becomes very static, almost like a drawing.
Yeah.
And I
But it's
also
still morphing, even though it's
yes,
static.
it's changing around. Things are appearing within the empty areas and expanding outward. Now this is what I call this dragonfly. This was done relatively recently on a high-def camera. With the high definition, I get better detail and more possibilities. But these kind of triangular things are coming from the side is from a computer screen that was just off camera. So what happens like out of the frame is sometimes like more interesting than happens inside. But the reason I think that it generates these cell-like structures is just because of the repetition. I mean, when you think of like an organic or a dragonfly or any living thing, we're all composed of cells, and each cell is remarkably identical to the one next to it. And with video feedback, you're just reproducing things over and over again. And so it's not surprising that you would see kind of cellular-like structures appearing in this work. This segment illustrates something that's interesting to me. The tendency, now this is when I turn the camera at an angle, things spiral around.
Right.
And so it creates these circular type of kaleidoscopic structures. What is interesting to me is that the rings are being formed, that you have different energy levels. The very center, you have very high energy for a very small number of little dots.
Yeah.
And then circling it, you have different bands of color and different populations, like very densely populated areas and sparsely populated. And that's a stable structure. And I don't really understand, why doesn't it just all become the same thing?
Yep.
I mean, why doesn't it just like degenerate into a whole bunch of dots? These structures are very stable and very consistent, not easy to obtain, but it's an interesting phenomenon anyway.
It is.
This is, I like this because it resembles a cloud. It kind of looks like a storm cloud. I was able to create this effect by projecting onto a 2-colored surface. So at this line, at this area, you could see a dark, and then light
white.
above that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was creating this white, colorful thing at the top,
The Northern Lights.
and then kind of dropping down these bits of rain, which are the lines again, fragmented into pieces.
Wow. So you've just started with a black and white wall.
That's right. I had no idea that this was possible. started happening that way, and I played with it, and I pursued it. Most of these are not preconceived. I mean, I don't think, sit down, before I sit down, I don't think what I'm going to do. It's a pretty much
Opportunistic.
it's pretty much like throwing darts. You know, I have educated guesses about what's possible and what could be created. This is I think the last video in the segment, and it kind of resembles a flower. I liked the colors, and I was able to change the shape of the flower by putting my hand in it.
Oh, so your hand actually affects what is shown in the middle, even though your hand
Yes,
is
even
not
though
in
my
the-
hand isn't anywhere near the middle. In fact, one of these techniques is that if I put my hand over the middle, it wipes out the image and everything goes away.
It has
So you
to
really
start over
yeah,
again.
Yeah, so you have to start on the outside and be kind of gentle with it, kind of act as if, you know, it's a sensitive being, because in effect, you know, if you act violent towards it, then it'll just shut down and it'll totally go away.
Okay, good. So this is all playing on flat walls.
That's right.
You've moved the walls, you've moved the camera, you've had
And I stand up in
things-
front of it and I try to,
You've
you know,
had things moving, the ribbon and things moving in front of it.
Right.
Okay, so the next segment's gonna be,
okay, so then, having a short attention span, I decided that I wanted to pursue other areas. And so I started talking with performers. And the idea was to create a video feedback performance with dancers and musicians, mostly improvised because you can't really script the thing I do.
Right.
So I started working with,
I don't know, Mike, in 25 years, you might be.
might be able to, but then I'd lose interest in it, I think. It wouldn't be as interesting to me. But if we could get the next series of clips rolling, I'll show you one of the very earliest performances that I did, which was in this studio back in September of 2003, I believe, was with a band called Skysaw. And this is a legendary show for people at SPG. We talk about this a lot, where I was introducing the sound and light conversion program I'd written called Melodicon. And so most of this segment, when it comes up, is going to have like colors all over the place, and that's not video feedback per se. So it may be difficult for me to explain the difference between one effect and the other, but I'd like to show
Right.
this.
The Melodicon was about musical notes, creating colors and images on a screen.
That's
and that
right.
was all computer
It's computer generated. Yeah.
generated from sound into
But it
light.
included a projector and a camera.
Right.
So it was an extension to the video feedback work that I've done.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at that segment.
I think it'll be any time now. You can see the repetition here, where I caught the face of the sax player and then projected him on different parts of the screen. But the colors you see, the changing colors is based on the sound of the musicians playing.
Okay.
But it's kind of difficult to process and to see exactly what's going on here. This is Corey Rebenek. He's an electronic zither player. It's an amazing instrument. And this is probably one of my favorite segments of the video. If he hits that chord, then all the colors start changing.
So the color is the Melodicon, but the image is all video feedback.
Right. Well, video feedback, it occurs when you point the camera at the projection. In this case, I was pointing it at Corey, but this is kind of introducing the idea of the performance with video.
Okay.
And so it's kind of it's an unusual technique to use the video camera as an artistic instrument. A lot of times video art is only art created with video. That is, a video camera is used to film something, and you call that art. And that is art. But what I'm doing is using the video equipment to generate the art.
Right.
So there's no way to create the art except with the video equipment. And that's demonstrating, this segment demonstrates that. I'm actually borrowing from an art tradition that goes back 100 years. When you think of the Cubism movement in painting that was popularized by Picasso, what he was doing was looking at one figure from two different points of view. So you know you have the nose over here and the eyes and the ears and everything's all mixed up. And you can do the same thing with video by overlaying two elements, two different perspectives of the same event. And you can see that happening here. This is a shoot that I produced here again at the SCAT Studios in 2004. This was a special shoot that we did for a performance that was later that year. So this resembles video feedback more in the sense that you can see the projection screen behind the performers, and occasionally I bring the camera up to show the video feedback. This is I give everybody credit for this, everyone at SBG, because I think Charlie was switching and the lighting is just fantastic. The performers are wonderful. This was really a magical kind of performance that only occurred in the span of like 15 minutes. I mean, the performers came in and we were basically set up, but we were running out of time and we just had to do a take. And so this shows Grant, who's the musician, projected on the background, so you see two different point of views of the performance simultaneously, and that's the Cubist element. This is the strong video feedback here. You can see the colors that are generated just from his white shirt, again with color cycling. It's kind of a difficult challenge to integrate video with performance because you don't want to overwhelm the people who are actually performing. I mean, I'm a member of the performance as well, although the audience doesn't exactly realize that because I'm usually off to the side,
Right.
But I think dancers are very sensitive to having a lot of flashy
Having
video
their-
stuff around
right, and
that people
letting-
are going to look at instead of looking at them.
Right, letting the dance actually look like dance.
So I try to enhance the performance rather than distract from it. And so we're adding elements here that are kind of interesting, like this liquidy kind of seems like liquid substance on the floor, it's like video pool or something on the floor. It doesn't detract from what they're doing, it just, it's another element.
And you
I
have
also-
control of that? You have control of making that puddle?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily,
No.
okay.
No, what I do most of the time is I shoot a lot of video, and then I take it back to my studio and I look at it. And I can go frame by frame and go through hours and hours of video, and I select the things that I like the most.
Okay.
And this is an edited video in which I took different camera angles, and so it's not exactly an improv thing. Like I did this editing.
Oh, okay.
But the fact that it was possible to come up with liquid video on the floor, which I seized upon as an editor and integrated into the video, I think it's a great thing to draw upon as an artist. This is a performance, this is a group that I joined called Inter Alia, and we've done 2 performances in the last year. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do in the future. but it consists of 2 musicians, 2 dancers, a visual artist who does painting while we perform,
Okay.
and myself.
Okay.
I don't know how much of that you're going to see with this, but you can see the one dancer is walking towards the screen,
Is that what she's doing? Okay.
just walking very slowly towards the screen, and I centered my camera on that and created that, first of all, the dual effect of the 2 figures, and then one coming into one, and now she's splitting apart again. So
Oh,
here you
here's
can
the
see the different
view.
perspectives. So there's the screen, I'm over on the far end,
Yeah.
and so here's the artist in the center with the kind of hand painting a canvas. I like the way the projector splashes color around. So even if you don't see the screen, you can see like a wash of blue or green that just appear on the skin. So it adds like an ambient color element that is. Now this is our second performance in which we decided to pick the canvases off the floor because the artist sitting on the floor was kind of a difficult experience for us. So we decided the artist should actually create the art standing up.
In front of us.
That's right. So you see that gesture she made with the paint is now being thrown all over the performance venue
Right.
on top of that canvas. And with all of the detail, it's very difficult to understand visually to see what's going on here. But there are 2 dancers holding blank canvases, and the artist is smearing color on the canvas while I do video feedback, and on the paint and on the dancers too. This artist, her name is Sky Schulte, and she does very abstract work. But she said that whenever she works with the video feedback, she creates a completely different effect, unlike any of her paintings, because it adds an element that is just so unlike her usual visual style.
Right.
And so she starts creating something completely unusual, even though when you turn off the projector and you try to, you look at the painting as the final product, you don't know that all of this was occurring while she made it.
Well, right. Because it's
so
a painting when she's done.
So you only see half the picture at the end. You don't really get the experience of, or the understanding of how the piece was created. Kind of a messy business.
Well, that's fun.
That was a kind of unexpected gesture from the musicians. I didn't expect them to wail like that. But
Yeah.
in response to it, I did something with the camera, which was similar. I mean, this is the kind of thing we try to do. It's to match the sound or the visuals that the dancers are creating with what I'm doing.
With what you're doing, yeah.
Which, as you can imagine, is kind of like very difficult because there's so much difference between what I do and what they're doing.
Well, there's so many things happening in the performance stuff
yes. That's
that-
another part, difficulty.
that interacting. It's really interesting what you realize. There's just tons of stuff that you can't even.
Right. Well, the whole thing about feedback is control. With audio feedback, maybe a lot of people will be familiar with this when you walk up to a microphone in a speaking engagement and you hear this whine, kind of sound. That's audio feedback. It's where the microphone is picking up what the speaker is creating a feedback loop.
Okay.
Controlling that is very important in audio. But Jimi Hendrix, the musician, controlled it quite remarkably. I mean, he spent his whole career trying to control audio feedback. So
Yeah.
he put his guitar up next to the speaker and make great sounds with feedback. It didn't occur to anyone to do that. Audio feedback was considered a problem. With video feedback, control is still an issue because you could, blank out the screen with white and you have nothing.
Yeah.
So that's the equivalent of the squeal of the microphone, right? But it's all about trying to get too much detail down to very small, something that's very manageable, and that's what basically I struggle with.
Excuse me.
So the next set of videos, shorter segment, it's about this next stage that I've taken this with. And so what I've done is I've started projecting onto people. And projecting onto performers and dancers had its own set of problems because they tend to move around a lot. So what I thought was I combined the the stillness of the flat wall
Right.
with people by telling people to sit still. So I hire models and project onto their skin and create the effects based on the shape and the reflectivity and the color and
All the
the
shadows.
texture of the skin itself. And that's been very fascinating to me. We can go ahead and show the next set of segments. This was the basis of my show that you were talking about
Yeah,
in
that
October.
I saw. Yeah.
About how the bombs come down and
This is
all
a
the
model
stuff
I worked with
happening
about a year ago.
and
We can turn down the
she-
volume a little bit. She was telling a story about a dream she had, and I really didn't care much about the story, but I let her talk because she really cared about it. And I got this pattern on her chest, and I was just wondering whether it was because of the emotions that she was feeling. I sometimes wonder if a pulse or something like that will generate a new effect. But in any event, I want the model to be relaxed and comfortable. And so she had some music going on in the background and just singing to it. And this whole, like, the color
Wow.
coming down her neck and coming off of her eye is just very, amazing to me.
And you've just put the camera on her. Now, have you adjusted the camera to find the color?
In some cases, yes. The setup is quite difficult sometimes. This is a model who shaved her head, and it was a fascinating study because in this case, it's an interesting pose because their knees resemble the shape of her head remarkably. So we've got these three forms here. But I was trying to create, as with any situation I'm in, I do the best with what I got. So basically I set the camera in the most convenient position, and
Right.
I do the best that I can with that position. And with the lighting and everything else. Most of the time, it's a confined space that we're working in, so there's not a lot of options. So you just improvise, you do the best you can. This, to me, I call this an homage to Georgia O'Keeffe, because it kind of looks like those
Her
antler.
cow- Yeah, her cow heads
Yeah,
and
yeah.
skulls.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the bald model. I really wanted to create something with her head. I wasn't exactly happy with what occurred because it just has this strobe effect. But I like, I don't know. I like the idea of the entire face because of how expressive the face is, how the colors can come around her cheek,
Right.
upper
And
ear.
out of her eye.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah. And you also see kind of a negative shadow on this area where the projection is bleeding around the side of her shadow. I call that the corona effect.
Well, I do know that some of the stuff you were showing in the show were that you can't show here because they were nudes and whole
Yeah,
body nudes
it's
and stuff.
somewhat
So
explicit,
you
yeah.
had to
Oh, there's plenty of stuff that I can, take from my portfolio
right.
that doesn't show exactly everything. But this is, well, I work with large areas of skin. And so the back is, of course, one of the largest areas. And the lines are being generated sometimes off of a small mole or like a little like shadow on her back or just anything at all. But the control is very difficult just because, wrinkles and spots and, like the elbow has all this stuff on it. it's very difficult to manage all of these different elements.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to me. I call this video mascara. And so what I did was I was able to concentrate exactly on the eye because if we're doing video feedback on the black part of the eye, then no light actually gets in the eye because that part is black. So it's possible for her to have her eyes open and wide open while I project onto her face. Otherwise, the light of the projector would be too bright.
Right.
Most of my models wear like sunglasses because
Yeah.
they're so bright. But I think that's it.
That was fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was I saw like the mascara one, and it's just like where that color comes. You don't know where that
Oh,
color
that
comes
colors,
from, or you
right.
do know where that color comes
No,
from?
well, that exact color, the yellow color,
No, the red.
The red,
like
yeah.
Dark red.
I have no idea.
You know,
I think that yellow color reminds me of bile, kind of, and it comes up a lot. I mean, you use the same equipment. I've seen I might even see the same colors here, but a color can be generated from the skin tone. I think
Okay.
that's a possibility. So maybe it only happens on her face. Maybe that's
Right.
because of that particular, maybe the reflection around her eyes or something like that. She may be bloodshot. I wouldn't tell her that.
Now you said you have the 3 color inputs in your
Yes.
projector. Now, if you switch those, what changes happens?
Well, basically, if you switch the blue wire for the red,
Yeah.
then whatever was red becomes blue.
Okay.
And so you're adding more complexity to the overall scheme. It's a fun thing to try because a lot of times the projector only puts out blue.
Yeah.
And I get tired of looking at the blue all the time.
Okay.
Technically, there's a reason why you can't do that with the green because the green has a signal in it, some signal that is important to the 30 frames
The
per
whole
second.
loop.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, now we're gonna play. We're gonna
Yeah.
go over to the video
Cool.
camera and the whole screen,
Okay.
and we're gonna spend the rest of this time seeing what we can make here.
What we can make just now before
just
the end of the
now,
show.
Before the end of the show.
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright.
Mike, let's go see what we can do.
All right. So the various elements I use, the controls I use are on the tripod, where I can move the camera back and forth. If you could get in focus. So you can see the camera is hooked up to the projector, and there's the cameraman, there's the set we were just sitting at, and so on. It's just a camera connected to a projector. But if I point the camera at the projection, there are the lines. And so if I zoom in very slowly, the lines become bigger. If I make the zoomed in image the same size as the frame, then some very interesting things start to happen. So, I mean, it's difficult to see what I'm doing exactly on the camera, but by zooming in, I make the images smaller. By zooming out, I make them bigger. And my whole endeavor is to try to make everything the same size. Well, why don't you stand in front of the image, and I'll
Okay.
tell you what I mean.
I'm standing in front of
Okay,
you.
so a little to the side.
Okay.
So, you can see that.
I'm
as the
only
image-
about 6 inches away from the screen itself.
Absolutely. And so each image in this case is getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
So you're kind of going off into the distance.
right.
That's because I've zoomed it out. Now if I zoom in, then each image gets bigger and bigger.
Oh,
So I've passed the balance point of the focus, and I've gone into, a very
you're
kind
in
of
that
crazy
space
mode.
between me and the screen.
So now if I find what's just right, just like Goldilocks, then everything lines up exactly on top of itself. And that's when stable patterns start to emerge. Because if they're all different sizes, then they won't reproduce. If they're all the same, then they are all, then as they are laying on top of each other, then they produce the effect.
Now, how you're compressing it all so that I sort of squeeze off into this little space
Yes,
over here.
I think that may be
And then you're
something
pulling it
having to
back
do with
out.
the lens of this particular camera. I've noticed that that effect occurs.
Okay.
Yeah.
But are you turning the camera to get that?
No, I'm not doing anything.
It's
No.
just doing that.
It's just automatically doing it. Now, if
Okay.
I change the angle of the camera, you can see how you start tilting up, and then you
Tip over
turn over,
backwards.
you're backwards.
Actually, I'm tilting.
You don't have to, because I'm doing that for you.
You're doing that for me.
So then this is what's creating the kaleidoscope effect,
And then we get all the colors.
right? And so as I keep turning,
We get red, orange, yellow.
yes, as you get closer to the center, then you get a different color. Now this is all coming up
Okay,
black
now-
and white.
Now, where are you getting the black and white? That's just because it's in center. It's looking at itself.
Well, the screen is gray, and it's really more surprising when color emerges. Now this is interesting because it's projecting onto your arm, so your arm is not creating much of a change. Your hair is, because it's dark, is creating like those dark spots. There you go. But the
Okay,
arm,
so my head now is controlling the size of that black
Absolutely.
and white space.
right.
And I
But now
reach
your
up
hands
with
have
my
very
arm.
little effect on it because they're about the same color as the screen, about the same color.
Right.
But because your hair
neutral,
is
more
different,
Neutral.
yes, a neutral color.
Okay, so if I start here and I start to walk backwards, then my arm is taking away the black and white.
Yes.
So I'm
In
doing this
effect, yeah.
erasing thing.
In effect, you could erase it using your arm, yes. So if I change the angle to be an even division of the circle, well, that's interesting. Look at that. Oh, wow. Now see how it's just appearing on your arm,
Oh yeah, there's the feedback just on my arm.
just on your arm. And this is the kind of thing that I found with the figurative work, that the camera finds a certain, well, you have to instruct it kind of, but it finds that element for you. Still continuing to turn the camera.
So now I'm 6 feet away from the screen.
Yeah, so what that means is your shadow is much more removed from the image.
Right.
When you're
so-
closer to the screen, then the shadow almost overlaps, and it produces a different effect. See,
Right.
here's the color cycling,
Here's
starting
the Roy
at,
G. Biv, red, orange, yellow,
yeah,
green,
so it
blue,
starts at
indigo,
red, goes
violet.
blue, then green. So what else was I?
Oh, that was cool.
Now,
I generated
now
that
some of the
line.
now at this point, this is where I get bored, right? Because it's just been the same thing over and over again. So I hit the menu button,
Okay.
and then I go in and I do something like the wall color. So this is a feature of a projector which allows you to project onto different colored walls, like a blackboard or a yellow wall if you
Oh,
have
I see.
one, right? So
Right,
what the
so it-
projector
it
does is
tries what
changes the
counts, right.
color to compensate. So if I cycle through each of these, you can see how it changes and creates a different set of colors off. Let's say this one would be primarily green. So
Right,
now,
because it's pink, so it's trying to project.
right, so it's doing the opposite color, and now I've got basically all green images. It's very interesting music to the background, isn't it?
Yeah, we found some techno.
Well, it just went away. Some of the other changes that I make to the projector are in the orientation. Most projectors have the ability to have a reverse image or upside down image based on where the projector is installed.
Ah,
So now you have two. So if you get closer to the screen, and we get back into
You can
focus,
find
yeah.
me. There
All
we
right.
go.
So now you're able to create.
so this is what you did with
symmetrical-
that dancer.
Yes, absolutely. To create two versions of that person.
Can I dance with myself upside down? Does
Go
that
wild.
work? Oh, there we go. I see my eyeglasses now. Oh, I can play the harp.
Yeah.
Now, if we turn
Oh,
this
this
on
is
the angle
interesting.
and start to spiral it, what happens with that?
Now, at this point, what's happening are what are called Moire patterns, in which you have an interference between two similar figures, in this case, straight lines. So the lines are overlapping each other in an interesting way and creating those, you see that texture kind of,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's just staying put, just like that. You can wipe it out with your hand, but then it comes back again, it's self-generating.
Yep. And if I walk across,
Now, I've never seen this effect in my life. I've never produced that ever. So this is
and
a
I can
first
I can
on
close it out
Somerville TV.
and slide it off.
You see that little bit coming off the top of your head if you stand in the center?
Yep.
Wow.
Well, at some point here, we're going to run out of time. I'm not sure
Yeah.
when.
Well, I'll be here all night, so
I know, we're having too much fun.
yeah. If anybody wants to come and play, just stop by, we're 92 Washington Street.
Yeah, yeah, we may not go home tonight. Who knows? Except I have to work tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
So this is Dead Air Live, and we're having just way too good a time here. And when the cameras go off, I'm sure everybody in the control room is going to come out here and play with me. So thanks, and you guys can stay on air as long as we're on air. And good night. We'll see you guys next time.
Well, it loses the information it had in order to create that image in the first place. You're supplying that information. And and as you jump out of the frame, then it has nothing else to do. So.
Now, can you rotate the camera enough to get the spiral of this? Generate the
No, in this case, it's not a spiral because
Done.
the
because of the
symmetry.
image,
Yeah,
because of the
because
split
it's
image.
a mirror image. Yeah.
Yeah. Now there's only one of me. Oh, so all our lines get broken up into these little whirlies. Oh, tigers. This is the leopard print. This is going away from the screen, coming into the screen.
Kind of like a Shiva thing with the arms.
They haven't shut us off air yet.
Okay. Still live.
We're having too much fun. It's an interesting turn on Broadway. So now we're in a square, so it's basically there's 4 of me.
Yeah, the squares are kind of problematic. Unfortunately, they tend to create swastikas. So that's the kind of thing I try to avoid.
And now
I
we've
love
got
those colors.
sides here. Good.
You still on?